The Dhammapada, Chapter 22, Niraya Vagga, Woeful states. Verse 306. Liars suffer. Abhuta vadi nirayang upeti, yo chapi katvana karomiti chaha, ubhopi te pecha samabhavanti, Nihina kamma manuja paratha. One who tells lies about others goes to Niraya, or a woeful state. One who has done evil and says, I didn't do it, also goes to Niraya. Both of them, being evildoers, suffer alike in Niraya in their next existence. An evil plot against the Buddha, Sundari. As the number of people revering the Buddha increased, some heretics found that the number of their following was dwindling. They had lost gain and honor, and no one knew whether they existed or not. Therefore they became very jealous of the Buddha. They were also afraid that things would get worse if they did not do something to destroy the reputation of the Buddha. So they sent for a young woman called Sundari and said to her, Sundari, you are a very beautiful and clever young lady. We want you to put Gautama Buddha to shame by making it appear to others that you are having an affair with him. By doing so, his honor will be destroyed, his followers will decrease, and many will come to us. Make the best use of your looks and be crafty. Sundari understood what was expected of her. Therefore, late in the evening, she went in the direction of the Jetavana monastery. When asked where she was going, she answered, I am going to visit Gautama. I live with him in the monastery. After saying this, she proceeded to the place of the heretics. Early in the morning the next day, she would return home. If anyone asked her from where she had come, she would reply, I have come home from the Jetavana monastery after spending the night with Gautama. She carried on like this for a few more days. Then the heretics hired some villains to kill Sundari and dump her body near the Jetavana monastery. The next day, the heretics spread the news of the disappearance of Sundari. They reported to the king, who gave them permission to search where they wished. Finding the body near the Jetavana monastery, they reported, O king, the followers of Gautama have killed Sundari and have thrown her body near the Jetavana monastery to cover up the misdeed of their teacher. The king replied, In that case you may go round the town and proclaim the fact. So they went around the town carrying the dead body of Sundari, shouting, Look at what the followers of Gautama have done. See how they have tried to cover up the misdeed of Gautama. When informed that the heretics were trying to ruin his reputation and honor, the Buddha only said, My sons, you just tell them this. One who tells lies goes to hell. One who has done evil and says, I did not do it, also goes to hell. Both of them, being evildoers, suffer alike in hell and in their future existence. The king then ordered his men to investigate the murder of Sundari. On investigation, they found that Sundari had died at the hands of some villains. When brought before the king, the villains admitted that they were hired by the heretics to kill Sundari and dump her body near the Jetavana monastery. The heretics were also brought before the king, and they confessed their role in the murder of Sundari. The king then ordered them to go round the town and confess their guilt to the people. So they went around the town saying, We have falsely accused the disciples of Gautama, just to bring disgrace on him. The disciples of Gautama are innocent. Only we are guilty of the crime. The heretics and the villains were punished for the murder of Sundari. As a result of this episode, the glory and the good name of the Buddha were very much enhanced. Verse 307. Corrupt monks suffer. Kasavakanta bhavo papa dhamma asanyata papa papehi kammehi nirayante upapajjare. Many men wearing the yellow robe up to their necks, who have an evil disposition and are unrestrained in thought, word, and deed, are reborn in a woeful state on account of their evil deeds. Those who suffered for their evil deeds. Once, the Venerable Mahamoggalana was coming down a hill with Venerable Lakhana when he saw some unhappy spirits. Back at the monastery, Venerable Mahamoggalana told Lakhana in the presence of the Buddha that he had seen 5 suffering spirits with their bodies engulfed in flames. Thereupon, the Buddha said, during the time of the previous Buddha, those 5 spirits were bhikkhus. They were not interested in their spiritual development. Instead, they had committed much evil. For the evil deeds they have suffered in hell, and now they are paying out the remaining term as suffering spirits. Verse 308. Be not immoral. Seyo ayo gulo bhutto tatto aggi sikupamo yanche bhunjaya dussilo rathapindang asanyato. It is better for one to eat a red-hot iron ball burning like a flame than to eat alms food offered by the people, if one is without morality or sila, and unrestrained in thought, word, and deed. Bhikkhus pretending to have attained perfection. Once there was a famine in the country of the Vaggi. So, in order to have enough food, certain bhikkhus made it appear to the people that they have attained purity, although they had not done so. The people of the village, believing them and respecting them, offered them much food, leaving very little for themselves. At the end of the Vassa, or the rainy season, as was customary, bhikkhus from all parts of the country came to pay homage to the Buddha. The bhikkhus from Vaggi also came. They looked hale and hearty, while the other bhikkhus looked pale and worn out. The Buddha inquired how all the bhikkhus had fared during the Vassa. The Buddha especially asked the bhikkhus from Vaggi whether they had any difficulty in getting alms food on account of the famine. They answered that they had no difficulty at all in getting alms food. The Buddha knew how those bhikkhus had managed to get enough food, but he wanted to enlighten them on this point, so he asked, "How did you manage so well in getting food throughout the Vassa?" Then the bhikkhus told him they had discussed among themselves and decided that they should address one another in such a way that the villagers would think that they had really attained arahanthood. Then the Buddha asked them whether they had actually attained arahanthood. When they answered in the negative, the Buddha advised them about the danger of accepting requisites from the devotees if they are not worthy of them. Verses 309 and 310. Adultery is evil. Chattari thanani naropamatto apajjati paradaru pasevi apunya labhamna nikama sayyang nindang tatiyang nirayang chatuthang. apunya labhocha gati cha papika bhitas bhitaya rati cha tokika raja cha dandangarukang paneti tasmanaro paradarang na seve. 4 misfortunes befall a careless man who commits adultery: acquisition of demerit, disturbed sleep, blame, and suffering in a woeful state. There is acquisition of demerit as well as evil destiny. Brief is the joy of the frightened man and woman. The king imposes a heavy punishment. Therefore, a man or woman should not commit sexual misconduct with another man's wife or man. The man whom women loved. Kema, in addition to being rich, was also very good-looking, and many women were attracted to him. They could hardly resist him and naturally fell for him. Kema committed adultery without compunction. The king's men caught him 3 times for sexual misconduct and brought him to the presence of the king. When informed that Kema was the nephew of Anathapindika, and out of respect for Anathapindika, the king did not take any actions against Kema, but only reprimanded him. When Anathapindika came to know of his nephew's misconduct, he took him to see the Buddha, who admonished Kema on the depravity of sexual misconduct and the seriousness of the consequences. Thereafter, he mended his ways and observed the ethical code of morality, or sila. A note from the author. When we refer to morality or sila, we must understand that a Buddhist is encouraged to observe daily the 5 precepts for his or her spiritual well-being and happiness. One undertakes the precepts to abstain from 1. Killing, 2. Stealing, 3. Sexual misconduct, 4. Lying, and 5. Taking intoxicants that cause heedlessness. Verse 311. Corrupt lives entail suffering. Kuso yatha duggahito hathang evanukantati samanyang dupparamatthang Niraya upakadhati. Just as kusa grass, wrongly grasped, cuts the hand, even so the monkhood, wrongly handled, drags one to a woeful state. Verse 312. A life of dubious holiness is not commendable. Yang kinchi siti langkammang sankilitancha yang vatang sankassarang brahmacharyang nitang hoti mahaphalang. Any loose act, any corrupt practice, a life of dubious holiness, none of these is of much benefit. Verse 313. What is proper should be done with one's whole might. Kairache kairatenang dalhang enang parakkame sitthilohi paribbajo bhiyo akirate rajang. If there is anything to be done, do it well, do it firmly and energetically, for the slack life of a bhikkhu scatters much dust. The obstinate bhikkhu. Once, there was a bhikkhu who was feeling remorseful for having unwittingly cut some plants. He confided this to another bhikkhu, who replied, "Cutting plants is a very minor offense. You only have to confide and confess to another bhikkhu. There is nothing to worry about." So saying, the second bhikkhu proceeded to uproot some plants with both hands to show that he thought very little of such trivial offenses. When the Buddha advised the monk, he was reckless and stubborn at first. At the end of the discourse, however, the reckless, obstinate bhikkhu realized the importance of restraint in the life of a bhikkhu, and thereafter he strictly observed the precepts. Later, through practice of insight, meditation, he attained arahanthood. A note from the author. The rule to avoid destruction of plants may seem trivial and impractical, but what the Buddha is emphasizing is the respect for all forms of life, however low, because all life forms are dependent on each other. Today, we can appreciate the Buddha's wisdom in advising us against the wanton destruction of the environment. Verse 314. Do not do even a slight wrong. Akatang dukkatang seyo, pacchatapati dukkatang, katancha sukatang seyo, yankatva nanutappati. It is better not to do an evil deed. An evil deed torments one later on. It is better to do a good deed, as one does not grieve for having done it. The jealous woman who tortured her maid. Once, a woman with a very strong sense of jealousy lived with her husband in Savatthi. She found out that her husband was having an affair with her maid. So, one day, out of anger, she tied up the maid, cut off her ears and nose, and shut her up in a room. After doing that, she accompanied her husband to the Jetavana monastery. Soon after they left, some relatives of the maid arrived at their house and found the maid tied up and locked up in a room. They freed her and took her to the monastery. The maid related to the Buddha what her mistress had done to her. She stood in the midst of the crowd for all to see how she had been tortured. So the Buddha said, "Do no evil, thinking that people will not know about it. An evil deed done in secret, when discovered, will bring much pain and sorrow. But a good deed may be done secretly, for it can only bring happiness and not sorrow." The jealous woman admitted her mistake and strove diligently to overcome and uproot her jealousy. Later, she realized the Dhamma. Verse 315. Guard yourself like a fortified city. Nagarang yatha pacchantang guttang santara bahirang evam gopetha attanang khanove ma upacchaga khana tita hi sochanti nirayam hi samappita. As a border town is guarded both inside and outside, so guard yourself. Let not the opportunity go by, for those who miss the opportunity come to grief when they fall into a woeful state. The bhikkhus who had to fend for themselves. In the first month of their stay in a border town, some bhikkhus were well provided for and well looked after by the townsfolk. During the next month, the town was plundered by robbers, and some people were taken away as hostages. The people of the town, therefore, had to rebuild and protect their town. Thus, they were unable to attend to the needs of the bhikkhus as much as they would have liked to. So the bhikkhus had to fend for themselves. At the end of the Vassa, those bhikkhus went to pay homage to the Buddha at the Jetavana monastery in Savatthi. They told the Buddha that due to the difficulties faced by the people, They also had to undergo hardship for the last 2 months of the Vassa. So, the Buddha advised them, Bhikkhus, don't keep thinking about this or anything else. It is always difficult to have a carefree, effortless life. Just as the townsfolk guarded their own town, so also a bhikkhu should be on guard and keep his mind steadfastly on his body. Verse 316. Be modest. Alajjitaye lajjanti, lajjitaye na lajjare. Micchaditti samadana, satta gacchanti duggating. Beings who are ashamed of what is not shameful, and are not ashamed of what is shameful, embrace wrong views and go to a woeful state. Verse 317. Have no fear in the non-fearsome. Abhaye cha bhaya dassino, bhaye chabhaya dassino. Micchaditti samadana, satta gacchanti duggating. Beings who see fear in what is not to be feared, and see no fear in the fearsome, embrace false views and go to a woeful state. The misguided naked ascetics. One day, some naked ascetics went on an alms round with their bowls covered with a piece of cloth. A number of bhikkhus, seeing them, commented, Those ascetics who cover the front part of the body are more respectable compared to these naked ascetics who go about without wearing anything but covering their begging bowl. Hearing this comment, the naked ascetics retorted, Yes, indeed, we do cover our bowls, but we cover them up to keep away dust from our food, for even dust contains life in it. When the bhikkhus reported what the ascetics had said, the Buddha replied, Bhikkhus, those naked ascetics are not ashamed of what they should be ashamed of, but are ashamed of what they should not be ashamed of. Because of their wrong view, their future state cannot be happy. Verse 318. See in what is wrong. Avajje vajja dassino, vajje chavajja dassino, micchaditti samadana, satta gacchanti duggating. Beings who imagine faults in the faultless and perceive no wrong in what is wrong, embrace false views and go to a woeful state. Verse 319. See both right and wrong. Vajjancha vajjato nyatva, avajjancha avajjato. Samadhitti samadana, satta gacchanti suggating. Beings knowing wrong as wrong and what is right as right, embrace right views and go to a blissful state. Children visit the Buddha. The disciples of an ascetic did not want their children to mix with the children of the followers of the Buddha. They told their children, Don't go to the Jetavana monastery. Don't pay respects to the bhikkhus of Shakyamuni. On one occasion, while those children were playing near the Jetavana monastery, they felt very thirsty. As the children had been told by their parents not to enter the monastery, they asked one of the boys, a follower of the Buddha, to bring some water for them. The boy went to pay respects to the teacher after he had taken a drink of water, and told him about his friends who were forbidden by their parents to enter the Jetavana monastery. The teacher then invited the boys to come and have water at the monastery. When those boys came, he gave them a sermon to suit their various dispositions. As a result, those boys became established in the Triple Gem, in the Buddha, in the Dhamma, and in the Sangha. When the boys went home, they talked about their visit to the Jetavana monastery and about the Buddha's teaching. The parents of the boys, being ignorant, cried, "Our sons have been disloyal to our faith. They have been ruined." Some neighbors of theirs, who were followers of the Buddha, explained to them the sublime and glorious characteristics of the Dhamma. Then they began to visit the Jetavana monastery to listen to the religious discourses given by the Buddha. In the end, they were all established in the Dhamma.